Okay, folks. So our goal for today is to be able to compare the motions of accelerating objects. So you're going to take notes on how to compare the motions of accelerating objects, and then you're going to practice comparing the motions of accelerating objects. And it should be pretty straightforward. We're just going to do one example, and then you've got 3 practice problems to do today. Okay, so example 1, we've got Mumtaz and Amaya. These are the equations for their motion. They are in a foot race. And so our first question here is who got more of a head start and how much did they get? So we're going to start with Mumtaz. We can see that she started 2 meters in front of the start line. Maya, on the other hand, started 1 meter in front of the start line. So Mumtaz got more of a head start. Who got a running start and how fast were they going? Oh, sorry, Mumtaz got a 1 meter, got a head start by 1 meter, right? Because she was 1 meter in front of Amaya, right? 2 meters minus 1 meter is 1 meter. So she was 1 meter in front of Amaya. Who got a running head start? How fast were they going? So now we're going to be looking at the B values in this equation. So we can see Mumtaz was going 0 meters per second. Amaya was going 1 meters per second. We can also tell this by looking at the graph. Right, if we look at Mumtaz's first segment here, it's much more flat than Amaya's is. Amaya's, the slope is much steeper between those first 2 red dots as opposed to the slope between those first 2 blue dots. So Amaya has to have started off going quicker. She started off going 1 meter per second. And so 1 minus 0 is 1. So Amaya got a running start. She was going 1 meter per second at the start. Oh, actually, we didn't need to subtract. This is just from that 1 right there. We don't need to subtract to figure it out. They were just asking how fast Amaya was going, not how much faster she was going. So 1 meter per second at the start. Who was accelerating faster? How much faster were they accelerating? So now we're going to be looking at the A values here. We're going to compare them. Remember that these A values are only 1/2 of the acceleration. So Amaya is accelerating faster, but to figure out how much faster she's accelerating, we need to use this we need to double this value. So 0.5 times 2 is 1. So Mumtaz is accelerating at 1 meter per second squared. Amaya, on the other hand, is accelerating at 1.5 meters per second squared because 0.75 times 2 is 1.5. Okay, so we can, Amaya is accelerating faster and she was accelerating 0.5 meters per second squared faster, right? 1.5 minus 1 is 0.5, so she's going 0.5 meters per second squared faster than Mumtaz is. All right, last question. Who was running faster after 1 second? How much faster were they running? So we can kind of tell from the slopes here that Amaya is running faster, right? Because this red line is steeper than this blue line. But really, we're going to have to go back to that other equation that we learned to figure out how fast they are each going. So we need to know the acceleration and the initial velocity of each person. That's why I've got those values highlighted. So the initial velocity of Mumtaz is 0. So we can see that right here, 0 meters per second. The initial velocity of Amaya was 1 meter per second. Whoops, and we can see that right here, 1 meter per second. Okay, and so then this is the formula, remember, to determine someone's velocity after a certain amount of time. V equals acceleration times time plus initial velocity. Right, this works for any object moving at a constant acceleration. And so we're going to plug in the values for A and VI for Mumtaz. Mumtaz acceleration is 1 meter per second squared. Right, so remember that this A is the acceleration, not the A value from the quadratic equation. And I know that's confusing, but we're using the acceleration value in this equation. So 1 meter per second squared. And then we're going to put in the initial velocity, which is 0 meters per second. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing. Whoops, got a lot going on here. We're going to do the same thing for Amaya. So we're putting in 1.5 meters per second squared for Amaya's acceleration, and then her initial velocity is 1 meter per second. Okay, and so then after that, what we're going to do to each equation, because the question asked how fast were they going after 1 second, is we're going to put in 1 second for time. So we're going to take 1 meter per second squared times 1 second plus 0 meters per second. Okay, and so 1 times 1 is 1, plus 0 would be 1. So Mumtaz is going to be moving at 1 meter per second after 1 second. Now let's do the same thing for Amaya. So we're going to take this equation and we're going to plug in 1 second. We're going to say 1.5 times 1 second. That equals 1.5. And then plus 1 over here. So 1.5 plus 1. That's going to get us to 2.5 meters per second. So after 1 second, Amaya is going to be moving at 2.5 meters per second. Mumtaz is going to be moving at 1 meter per second. So if we take the difference, we'll see that Amaya is running faster by 1.5 meters per second squared. Okay, so pay attention to what questions I ask in the problems. You can see I ask slightly different questions in each of the problems here, but just sort of pay attention, think about them, give them your best shot, and then we'll go over them together when we meet on Thursday. All right, so have a good day, and I will see you all on Thursday.